Good afternoon, everybody. As Sean said, my name's Hannah Williams and I work for the No Falls Foundation. This afternoon, we're going to hear from the Foundation's 3 ambassadors. So firstly, we have Jason Anker MBE, Dylan Skelhorn and Paul Blanchard, who are our 3 ambassadors, as I said, and they will be sharing their personal experiences in falls from height. Am I echoing somewhere here? So you've heard some recurring themes today throughout the day, and we'll be exploring those a little bit further during this session. I wanted to pick up firstly on something that Peter mentioned in the question and answer session that he had with Sean earlier on. He mentioned that ROSPA estimate that when we talk about working at height injuries, fatalities, generally we are talking about people in the workplace. And ROSPA estimate that if you take that into the domestic environment, it may be as much as a factor of 40, which when you actually do the sums is pretty enormous. So, you know, over 5 years, we could be talking about 1.2 million accidents and up to 8,000 fatalities, which are pretty big, frightening numbers. On that note, I just wanted to do a little bit of a poll and see how many people in the room, even if it was a small minor incident, have actually experienced a fall, whether it be from standing on a chair to change a light bulb or a ladder or anything. Anybody put your hands up? Okay, so most people by the look of it then. And how many people know a colleague, family member, friend, neighbour who's had an accident falling from height? So pretty much everybody. And out of those, how many were serious? Okay, so you can see that we are always talking about incidents in the workplace, but you can see it really does affect a lot of people in the domestic environment as well. And in the future, I think it'd be interesting to explore when we're talking about culture in the workplace, but also, well, what is that culture and why is that number so high? Anyway, thank you for that. That's interesting. So our panel are going to give a brief introduction to themselves and their experiences. So, Jason, would you like to begin?
Hello, everybody. Am I on? Yeah, hi. I'm quite lucky because you saw the video. My accident was in 1993. Even though it was 26 years ago, very common accidents happening today. Ask up a ladder, end of shift, trying to get a 2-job done in an hour. Inexperience, low morale at the time. I chose not to speak up, even though I know something's not right. You know, I had training on different jobs I'd worked in, but I just chose not to speak up. I fell 10 feet from a ladder. You know, that was what caused a life-changing story for me. It was 26 years ago. I know these guys injured a lot shorter time than me, but the common theme in all the stories is more or less exactly the same. You know, it's trying to please people, get a job done, not speaking up, and all these themes have followed me around for years. And I'll come back to it a bit later, but you know, I was sort of inspired by what Brian said this morning about the mental health, mental well-being of people. You know, I go back sort of 9 months from my accident. I was in a really bad place. My marriage was failing, 2 young kids, in a job I hated, low morale. So did that influence that decision I made that day at work? And it's a question I'm sort of asking myself at the moment. And actually, I think it did. I think I was, as much as safety trainings and training was a part of what was missing from my accident, I think my own health and well-being at the time played a significant part in that decision I made that day.
Thank you, Jason. Dylan?
I was working as a solid fuel heating engineer at the time when I had the accident. I'd been in the fire brigade before that. My accident happened in 2011. And for going into this company on day one, it was a complete opposite of the fire brigade. We had no safety. I remember asking for a safety harness because I was working at height all the time, scared of what I was doing. I was climbing ladders with people no footing them at the bottom. We weren't allowed that. I didn't even know I'd asked for it. And just basically told, no, if you don't like it, there's the door. And like Jason, you know, we're put in that situation. We've got bills to pay. You need to please people. If you don't, you lose your job. Made the wrong choice, and I fell 33 feet off a chimney stack, landed on a wall on my side.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gents. Now, I had my accident in 2010. Now, I was a bricklayer. I was a builder from leaving school. So at that time, I'd had nearly 40 years' experience. And I was running a small company, to be fair, like. But I was doing a job for some farmers, believe it or not. I was repairing some roofing sheets. And I fell. Not very high, about 12 foot actually, about the same height as this building. And I ended up paralysed from the chest down. T6 if you want to be technical, but that was it. There was a lot to blame on that day. I'd had all of years' experience. They was at fault. In fact, they had ended up with a court case. So that's where it comes from. But I made mistakes. And I and my family have to pay the consequences of that. And that's what I'm very big about talking about, to be fair. I hear what went wrong, what could be changed, what should be changed, where mindset comes in, and etc. But I and my family have to pay the consequences of that day. July the 18th, 2010, 10:30 on a Sunday morning. That's how it goes.
Thanks, Paul. So throughout the day, I know it's been mentioned quite a few times, we've talked about culture. As we heard earlier, one of the observations of the all-party parliamentary group report was that when it comes to work at height, that culture is a major factor, and as I said, it's been a recurring theme. And I think it was Sarah Jardine this morning who used the phrase that we need to ensure that unsafe working at height becomes culturally intolerant, which I quite like that expression. So on that note, how do you think, you've just mentioned culture, mindset, Paul, how do you feel that culture, what role does culture have to play when it comes to falls from height? Culture
starts from the beginning. It starts from the first day an apprentice, if you like, or trainee starts work. And that mindset ought to be, if you like, learn to do a job safely before you learn to do a job. And you progress through that, you have that attitude for the rest of your days. Not to spoil your life, to spoil your earning money and etc., but just have a positive and a safe attitude, a safe practice, if you like, about you approach your work.
So do you think that people, when they start an apprenticeship, is there generally a culture where you think that isn't in place, or maybe at the time of your accident?
I think it's changing.
Yeah.
It's not changing as rapidly as you think, and some firms are better than others. And I think that's a general thing across the board. Mm-hmm. But yes, it's moving on, but it needs to move faster and better.
Okay, so what's the biggest challenge in trying to change that culture?
Well, it starts from the top, doesn't it? It starts from the company to create the right policies and the right attitude within the company, the training. And then it stems through, doesn't it? You can even talk it from a safety attitude, doesn't it? It starts from the director of the company, works through managers, supervisors, men on the shop floor or men on the site.
And Dylan, what do you think is the biggest barrier to culture change?
I think it's like what Paul said, but also from the top. Safety's got to come from the top. Like you said, when I went into the job I was working in, I asked for a safety harness. I wasn't allowed one. I asked if somebody could foot my ladder for me. I wasn't allowed it. It costs money. Time is money, all that kind of stuff. So it could be that way, but also the other way as well. So it could be a good boss who wants you to be safe, but then the person working for them doesn't want to be safe. It's down to the individual themselves. You've got that choice you can make. Yeah, there might be consequences. You might lose your job. You might lose money, but it's down to you. Nobody can make you do that job. You choose to do it. And I think for all three of us, we all chose to do what we did that day. We made the mistake. You know, that's what it came down to.
I guess that sort of brings us nicely onto the topic of speaking up. Actually reporting incidents, and again tying it back into the APPG report, and we've talked today already again about implementing the confidential and enhanced reporting of near misses and accidents, and I just wondered, how much do you think that fear of speaking out and the subsequent consequences prevent people from actually talking about and reporting near misses or sort of minor incidents? Jason?
Yeah. I've been speaking for 10 years now, and for probably 8 years it was all about not speaking that day. I put all my accent down to not speaking up, and I think we sometimes get shifted on the Joe, someone on a really good day at work because they've got no problems in their home life, and he comes to work, he's been really well trained, and he thinks something's unsafe, and he's got a good manager and all those things in place, he may be tempted to speak up. But I think we think speaking up is so simplistic that we just see it unsafe, we all speak up. And I guarantee all these people in this room, if you see someone working unsafe, sometimes you just question yourself. Even the job we do in safety, we get to a place sometimes, you know, go to the supermarket, you see someone working unsafe on a set of steps. Can we all, hand on heart, honestly say that we always go and speak up? Or do we sometimes think, oh yeah, okay, and we're doing the job we do? So just saying it's okay to speak up for me is so simplistic. We've got to look into some of the consequences, or some of the reason why people choose not to speak up. And as we all know, it always starts with management. For me, everything starts with management. And if we can create an environment where people can speak up, and it's not always just about safety, by the way. If you do speak up about, you know, the piece of equipment's not right, or they're unsure how to use it, that's some training. But we were speaking about this earlier. If someone goes on a training day and he gets signed, he's been on a 2-day course, we don't understand though what sort of position was that guy going to that course on. You know, he could have problems at home, outside issues, that he sat on the course for 2 days and very little has actually gone in, but he's ticked a few boxes, he's looked at other sheets, he's passed the course. And we take that person as being a trained, competent person. And yet we don't understand that maybe on the day of his training, he wasn't in the right place. So for me, it goes back to management. It goes back to, we need to create an environment where it's okay to come to speak up about all sorts of problems, not just safety. You know, if you've had a bad day over the weekend, you come to work, and I know Dylan, I don't know Paul, but I know Dylan especially, he was in a right bad place for that, wasn't you? He hated his job, low morale, he wanted to get out, I'll stay here for a few weeks longer. I was much the same, I hated the job. So for me, another safety course will probably stop me from doing what I did. Maybe the only problem stopped me from doing what I did, having decent management who'd recognise I was in problems. You know, I've been late for work on many occasions, not turning up, not really pulling my weight at work, so I had low morale. So I wasn't really working quite very productively anyway. So for me, I always hark back to this thing before. If someone just asked me at the time, was I okay? You know, health and well-being back then was non-existent, and yet what we've got today, we're in a place where we recognise it's okay to not to be okay. That's a bit of a cliche saying, but it is. And I know that I struggled more because I just thought to myself I'd not spoke up that day. And 8 years later, I'm suddenly realising that there was issues why I didn't speak up that day. And just to say to people, if you've got a problem, you must speak up, I think it's a very simplistic sort of expectation.
That ties in quite well with a lot of what's been said today about recognising, looking for signs with people as well. Okay. In terms of sort of starting to get onto the foundation and what that's about, after you had your accident, what support was there for you? Paul, do you want to take that?
Support was lacking. That's what's fantastic about the foundation. Yeah, awareness, recognition and research and etc. That's great. At the bottom line, at the end of the day, if everything's done correctly and people don't have accidents, you ain't got to worry about anything else. But the National Health Service was fantastic with me. It saved my life. I was in hospital for months and all sorts of things without going into too much detail. But come home, yes, you've got your bed there, you've got your gear there, but that's it, basically. Certainly never any counselling concerning your mental condition, how you're coping with it, and etc. And again, repeat the consequences, how your family's going to cope, etc. Because yes, I've had the physical thing, but it affected my family entirely. My wife became my carer. And etc. But it's out there if you search for it. I've never known anybody paralysed, paraplegic. We've never lived with anybody in a disabled situation before. So everything was new. And you had that fear factor of what's happened to you. You all of a sudden you feel like you're paralysed after being physically fit and able. Life changes forever. No, the support isn't there, unfortunately.
And I guess that's probably a common theme throughout the panel.
Just to add on, I actually spoke on Monday. Stefan, is it DWF, the solicitors, did a presentation. One of the guys who spoke before me was involved in the disaster on the power station that collapsed and 4 people died. And he was just talking about that when these accidents happen, and it's really odd to think, we don't think about this, that somebody's been killed or seriously injured in hospital, and yet the wife who's, you know, going to have all these problems still has to pay the mortgage bills. You know, no matter if someone's been injured in the hospital for a length of time, she's got to still pay the bills. You know, she's got kids at home, and I think in some ways it's sort of not recognised. And people talk about compensation. Well, you know, you might have to wait for your compensation, but how do people pay the mortgages in the first 3 months after someone's been injured? And I think that's what needs to be looked at as well.
So if the foundation had been around at the time, Dylan, what do you think, what difference do you think that might have made to you?
All kinds of different support, maybe financial, just a bit of backup, to maybe, when it comes to sticking up for you legally and stuff like that. I found after my accident, the only people that were ever on my side all the time and never ever once blamed me was the HSE. My doctor wasn't on my side sometimes. My lawyer wasn't on my side sometimes. Telling me, you might get nothing at court just because you've had an accident, don't think you're going to get money for it, all this kind of stuff. And you're sitting there fearing for your future, because all I'd ever done since I left school was physical work. I was then told I'm 40% disabled for the rest of my life. You'll never work physically again. Well, that's just like saying, well, you've not got a life anymore, And like Paul was saying, that the worry of it, what am I going to do for my future, It's really scary. And I was lucky. I say I'm lucky because I never had a family. I never had a wife and kids that, I could have ruined their lives. I only ruined my own life, I'd say. But my family as well, my mum and dad, my brother, I've had an effect on their life, the accident has. But I always say I'm glad I never put other people like that, close to me through that sort of thing, paying the bills, all that kind of thing. I was lucky I lived with my mum and dad. I wouldn't have been able to pay a mortgage. I wouldn't have been able to pay for the car, food for the kids, all that kind of stuff. It's so scary. And that kind of thing, is what you worry about as soon as you have the accident. What am I going to do? What does my future, hold? What's going to happen?
I miss what I can't do with my grandchildren. Yes, I had grown-up children at the time of my accident, but my grandchildren are around now. So the eldest is 18, but the youngest is down at 3-year-old. I can't do the things that I ought to be able to do because of a consequence of an accident.
Even down to things like being told by your lawyer, by the way, you're entitled to industrial injuries benefits. The benefits people won't tell you that, but we'll tell you. So go and apply for it. You don't get told stuff like that. Just simple little things like that you need to know. I could get a bit of extra help financially. My money was actually taken off me 5 months after my accident, my benefits money. They said I was fit to go back to work. So go back, contact your employer and go back to work on crutches on roofs. Work that one out. But that's what they said, crazy. And that's what you're told. And if it hadn't been for my mum and dad putting a roof over my head, feed me, putting some money in my pocket, I'd have been living on the streets. That shouldn't be happening, that should be illegal. But this is the way I was treated, and other people as well. I think, Jason, you went through the same sort of thing, didn't you?
Okay. Anybody got any questions for our panel at all? No, everyone's quiet. Go on.
Stephen from Cable Safe. I've known you before, Jason, some years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, to a seminar. And we train people for working at height, and I use your accident we don't mind in conversation with them, and basically sometimes that just cheers people that. Saying that, I think in all 3 cases, besides the gentleman on the end who admitted that he was well trained from being an apprentice, he was working for small, medium-sized enterprises at the time, which is what we discussed earlier, or was discussed up there earlier, about where the accidents are. You can't really stop them by trying to impose law as such. What you need to do is, in a way, impose law, but tell these companies, these small businesses, that they can't work at height. They're not allowed to work at height unless they've been trained beforehand. They can't go into somebody's house to decorate the outside, wash the windows, unless they've had some kind of working at height training. That's what needs to be done, nothing else, because that will stop them from working at height unless they're being trained. The Health and Safety Executive have stated, after looking at reports, that people who are trained do not have accidents. It works, training works. So, in my opinion, we need to start limiting the fact that small, medium-sized enterprises can go out there and basically work at height just willy-nilly.
That's an interesting view. What's your thoughts on, we did mention earlier, we looked at financial penalties, and we looked at some different case studies, didn't we? And it was interesting to see the different amounts. What's your thought on the sort of preemptive penalty? So they went in, they could see there hadn't been an accident, but they fined them because it wasn't sufficient.
Fines for me are a bit strange anyway, because the large companies, they can afford the fines. And they don't want to have accidents, obviously, but if there's an accident, they will pay the fine, and they'll just carry on as a business because they've got so much money. The small, medium companies themselves, they need to look into this because they do not survive. My father-in-law's company I was working for a time, he went under straight away. No one will touch him no more. So all the guys who worked for him, they all lost their jobs. And the fallout from him today is that, he still reflects on that accident. So just rambling slightly, somebody else who works with me, he ran a small company. Unfortunately, 4 people was killed, and he refused to fold the company. He was basically told by his insurers, go bankrupt, go bankrupt. And he said, no, I refuse to do it. And when he told me this story, I had to sort of say I had to apologise in a way, because have you ever seen a story of an accident and the next paragraph will say, and the company went bankrupt? What do we actually think about the accident? We blame them straight away. They're going bankrupt, they're guilty. You're actually told as a small company to go under because you have not got the money to fight the case and then actually come out the other side and get more work. So for me, small companies need to know that if one of your guys is not trained, you don't pay the fee to go and get someone trained for all your guys. It might cost you a small outlay to go and get them trained. The consequences are, if something does go wrong, the chances are you'll actually lose everything. So again, is investing in training worthwhile? So if we can come up with a solution to help small companies go through the training, I think it's amazing.
Yeah, it's good that training does work.
Yeah.
Any other? We got time for any more questions?
Before you
Yep.
answer the question, can you wait for a microphone? We're recording the session and you
Sure.
can hear the question if you're...
Certainly.
Jason will hand you a microphone.
Anybody got any more questions? Over here, Jason.
I appreciate prosecution isn't the solution, but we're talking about the small medium enterprises will be taken to court and fined, but there's still people above that. There's ultimately the employer, the client. What you see in these cases, it doesn't go far enough up the ladder, and until it goes, as a designer, I design permanent systems for working at height. And there's this perception that a tenant is more important than a service engineer or an operator of that equipment. And when they do the under design risk assessment process, they will give that a weighting because there's a financial impact. Until prosecution's forced further up the line, the chain of command, and it hits the people that should be making the right decisions early in the process, you're going to struggle to improve the numbers.
I don't think also he's not been of all the few people who've actually been sent to prison. I don't think yet there's been one from a PLC, from a big company. It's always the smaller companies because they haven't got the finances to fight the case. No. If that's a fair comment.
No, that's exactly right, and therein lies a problem. I start getting involved in design on sort of the REBA stage 1, 2, which is concept, and that's when you should be looking at designing a system not only for the work duty that it's required to do, but for operatives to use it safely, and service engineers, maintenance engineers, repair engineers to go in there and carry out their work safely. And I don't think that's given it enough focus and attention. And that's, I think, working at height, that's where we need to spend more time on that, particularly for permanent installations, which can include re-roofing roofs or accessing chimp flues. It's a permanent installation which needs permanent access to get to it and work safely.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yep. Over there, please, Jason.
You'll get there.
Hi, I'm Tamsin from Atlas. I just wondered if you wouldn't mind if I asked your personal opinion on the outcome of your cases. I mean, like in terms of what the investigation found and the penalties imposed, please.
Right. Well, these people I was working for was fined £35,000, 2 counts at £10,000 and £15,000 costs. And the reason being was, I had a small company, and a well-trained company, by the way, sorry, I'm not picking you up, but there was things that they hadn't put in place. So if you like, they was liable. That was the bottom line for it was. Otherwise, as far as compensation and whatever, I had my own insurances as a company, and that would have been it. But that was the bottom line. They was fined £35,000.
Before I had the accident, I'd asked for this safety harness, and my boss had actually told me that we had permission to work at height without safety harnesses. We had a special dispensation for the HSE. Now, he told this to my previous colleagues that had been there previously before me. Crazy. And I never believed it. And after the accident, I got a phone call from my boss when I got out of hospital, and I was told to come down to the office. I go down, and he's typing away on his computer, ignoring me. All of a sudden, he starts acting excited. I found it. And I'm thinking, what the hell is he talking about? Found the special dispensation. So he prints out this special dispensation, and he's typed this up fraudulently after my accident to try and convince me my accident was my fault. I asked if I could keep a copy of it. Stupidly he said yes. I took it straight to the HSE. He said, we never issued this, we never would. He was only fined £20,000 at court. Now, I used to make him £12,000 a week lining 2 chimneys for the council. That was 1 van on the road. He had 5 vans, so 20,000 to him was nothing. And when it was brought up at court, the judge said about this dispensation, I believe he thought this was real. How could he think it was real if he typed up himself? Crazy, but that's what happened. And, you know, to this day, it's still, my mind boggles. It's like, you know, how did he get away with that? £20,000. This was just before fees for intervention came in. The fines weren't as big, and he got away with it. Now, he shut the company down a year before going to court because he was advised by his lawyer to do that. He put 8 of my colleagues out of job, and he got fined £20,000. Now, he got a third off because he pleaded guilty early. He was told to do that. So it should have been 30,000, but it was 20,000. Like I say, I could make him that in less than 2 weeks. So the fines aren't high enough, you know, it's not right, it's not fair. Well, in my case anyway, I would say.
There was no fines. I was working for the Islamic school at the time. They had no insurance. My boss at the time, father-in-law, it was a recession. He was just trying to find some work, some guys. Unknown at the time, he'd not paid his insurance neither. So I waited 14 years to get a bit of compensation. We sued everybody. Anyone who was near that site would have sued everybody, and eventually we got some money. 26 years later, the school is abandoned still, but plans have just gone in by the owners of the land, and they sell it for about £5 million, which is why I've already been paid out and signed it all the way. So, but again, I think compensation is that word sometimes, and fines. That do they really off-put people?
I use the word as far as compensation, because that's been hinted about. I was compensated, not a lot, but anyhow. But I'd talk about, I said, yeah, I've got financial security, but give me £1 million. I ain't got £1 million, but give me £1 million, or give me my legs. I'd give up everything I've got apart from my family. So compensation don't mean a thing. End of story. Can I just pick up on something that Peter had said a little bit earlier on about the accident of falls, the reason of falls, prevention of falls. Talk about a fella or a person who's not used to going on heights is maybe a little bit more cautious that somebody's doing it day in and day out. And then you get an acceptance of risk and a loss of fear. But you need to manage that risk. It's all right being confident, it's all right being complacent, but you need to manage your risk at heights. That's it.
Okay. Any more questions? Still going? Anybody? No? Good. Okay, well, I'd like to thank our panel. Thank you very much for being so candid and sharing your stories with everybody. And thank you all again for being here, and thank you for listening.